Hi, and welcome to another episode of Can't Stop the Growth. I'm your host, Chad Peterman, and today we're going to talk about some reading I've recently been doing from Tony Robbins, who I'm sure everyone's heard of, and his concept of what he calls the 7 lies of success. I'm only going to talk about 3 specifically and how those relate to leading ourselves and also leadership of others. A lot of good stuff here in this content, and we'll take a listen to the audio from one of our future leaders sessions that we had here at Peterman Heating, Cooling, and Plumbing, and I'd like to share that with you. So without further ado, take a listen to the audio. Hope you enjoy. So I wanted to share that stuff with you. I think it has a lot of application in what we do each and every day, especially with how fast we're growing. Growth can trigger a lot of positive. It can also trigger some negative that I think it's important to be aware of, to understand, and then to hopefully, learn from and maneuver around. So the big thing, the book that I found is Unlimited Power. I'm sure everybody's heard of Tony Robbins. Obviously, he has a lot of stuff, extremely famous, probably one of the, if not the most famous kind of motivational self-help guys out there. But this book is really good. It goes from, each chapter seems to, if you're interested, seems to go from very easy, and then he gets kind of technical. So if you've ever seen his stuff, he's got like a documentary on Netflix where he goes through kind of one of his trainings. He has like week-long seminars and stuff like that, which I've always been kind of intimidated by. That seems like a lot. But yeah, so I guess don't judge a book by its cover. But in this, the couple of, I pulled out some stuff from a couple of chapters, and one of the ones is what he calls the 7 lies of success. And this chapter kind of centers on belief. So we've talked about habits before. We've talked about routine. We've talked about different stuff like that. Obviously, our habits are going to ultimately kind of guide our life. They're going to create that identity, and they're going to really help us develop that belief system that we take into the world. The interesting thing about belief is that, we oftentimes don't think about it. It's something that you develop, and oftentimes your beliefs are things that you got to kind of check yourself. Like very similar to what I experienced this week was just reflecting back on some things that, oh yeah, I believe in that, or oh yeah, I understand that to be true. And when your habits and your beliefs are ultimately going to align to create who you are and who you're going to eventually become, is that advancing your career? Is that being a better parent? Is that being a better spouse? Whatever that may be, ultimately that is what is going to align. And so when it comes to belief, obviously there are a lot of things you can believe. There are things that, I don't believe that, or that's not true in my experience, and different things like that. And what Tony kind of hits on is 7 things that essentially he calls them lies, not in like it's like deceitful, but more so we don't know it to be true or not true, but more than likely, and in his recommendation, we're going to get a whole lot better results if we believe it to be true. There's a lot of things in life we kind of take for granted, like, well, that's got to be true, or I believe that, or whatever it may be, and we don't really have concrete evidence of this. There's no data backing that up, but it's what we build our belief system on, is what we see, what we hear, how things are presented to us in the world. And so I wanted to pull out 3 of these 7 that I think are extremely applicable to kind of what we do here, and really I think kind of pinpoint on what these meetings are about, is how do we become better leaders, how do we become better in our own lives. So the first one that he touches on is that everything happens for a reason and it serves us. So that's kind of his first lie. There again, lie meaning we don't know for certain if everything happens for a reason. And we don't know if everything serves us, but I think we could probably all agree that if we believe that, probably some more positive things are going to happen in life. I always look at this from a perspective, and like I said, I always say this knowing that I probably annoy quite a few people, but I always look at it as whatever happens, positive or negative, in order to move forward, you almost have to look at it as everything happens for a reason. So something negative happens, well, it happened. How do we react to that? I always look at it on kind of a continuum, and I think I've talked about this before, is if I'm at point A, if I view it as that this is the worst thing that's ever happened, I'm going to go backwards. Or I can look at it as everything happens for a reason. How do I move forward from here? And it's a lot about just understanding what is possible. So I think that sometimes what is viewed as negative oftentimes holds us back or stops us in our tracks, or we're uncertain that we can grow given what we've been presented. And I think it's important to understand that a lot of positive can be drawn out of a situation that you would have otherwise viewed as, well, I don't know why this is happening to me. Bad stuff always has happened to me. Well, is it, or do you just view a lot of stuff in a negative light? Could be that. And I hear this, a lot in the office from technicians, different stuff like that, where, I think sometimes we have a tendency to get in our own way, especially, there again, everything happens. Most times that's change. It's a lot of change. So, and if you've worked here for any length of time, you know that we change, and we change often, and we are moving at a breakneck speed. Sometimes I don't think we give ourselves credit for how fast we are actually moving and growing, but it's one of those things where, how do we view that particular change? Do we view it in a negative light, or do we view it in a positive light? And a lot of times that comes down to understanding why something is happening. And I think in leadership, understanding that everything happens for a reason, we as leaders have to understand that people that you are implementing change with, they may not oftentimes see everything that we do in this light. They may not see that everything happens for a reason and it serves us. They may think that, well, God, why is this happening? Like, this is terrible. This is a bad idea. Whereas it very well may be a bad idea, but let's have that conversation and let's understand how we can work through that together. Because ultimately, no one here showed up wanting to make anyone's life miserable or do a bad job or anything like that. I don't think. God, I hope not. That would be a miserable existence. But everyone wants to do the right thing. It's just a matter of how we kind of go about it in a way. I was looking at this morning, and you guys are going to laugh, and well, you might not laugh because you're like, well, that's the nerd in them. But I was thinking about this as I was preparing this morning, and I go over and I have one cup of coffee, and I'm ready to go get my second one. I've got through this. I'm like getting real jazzed up because this is my stuff, and I'm like feeling good. And I go over, and we have one of the, it's got the pods of coffee, and I look in the little basket that we hold them in, and sure enough, mine are out. I'm like, God dang, But as I was preparing this, I just went over this. I was like, you know what? That's fine. This is good because we keep the extra coffee downstairs. So you know what? This is good. I get to walk down the stairs, walk up the stairs, a little exercise this morning, get the blood flowing. This will be good. Well, everything happens for a reason. Well, I walked down there, and wouldn't you know that I also needed to get my clothes for this morning, which are downstairs on the dryer. So I needed to make the trip anyway. So my biggest thing with this piece, and there again, it does take practice, because if you've always been in a situation where you don't always view everything happens for a reason and that serves you, It's easy to get derailed from this. But what I can tell you is if you practice it, and you practice moving through the day with this understanding, you start to build momentum, and momentum is an extremely powerful thing. Once you build momentum and you train yourself to do this, you can create some really, really cool things because you're always looking for the positive. You're always looking for how situations serve you, how you can get better. There's a guy who I've read his book. He's a former Navy SEAL. His name's Jocko Willink. A very straightforward guy. He is a true SEAL. I'm glad he was protecting our country type of guy. And he has a philosophy that he calls, and I've probably shared this before, that he calls good. So when any situation arises, he responds by saying, good. Positive or negative, good. And the reason that he does this is it keeps that positive momentum. He understands that everything happens for a reason and that it serves him. So, you oversleep, good. You got some extra sleep. You probably needed that today. Is it going to put the rest of your morning in a rush? Maybe a little bit, but I'm sure you can probably find the positive in getting a little extra sleep and moving forward in all that. This belief, I think, kind of centers on everything. On if you have this, it makes a lot of these other lies a lot easier to believe. And as you move through and you create that momentum, you start to achieve things and you start to really, and this is, I know, high in the sky, but you start to attract things. And I've seen this in my life. When you are positive and you are looking for the best in everything, you start to attract things that are good in your life. And I think everybody would probably agree with that. If you're naturally negative, you're always looking for the negative, then you're probably going to find a lot of negative situations in your entire life. So if every day you start off and this is the worst thing ever, I'm going to probably guess that you are going to have a bad day. You're not going to magically change and all of a sudden have just a wonderful, pleasant day because it takes a lot to kind of change where you're at. The second lie that he talks about is that there is no such thing as failure. So obviously, there again, back to the lie thing. Not a lie, it's a lie in the sense that we don't know that that's true. Maybe there is such a thing as failure. I don't know. But viewing life in such a way that there is no failure, there's only learning. So there are multiple times, and I actually just had an instance this morning where we have an issue in the, at work, and we got to solve this and this, that, and the other. And the great thing about it is we're going to learn so much from this. And that goes back to the first one. Well, we probably screwed it up, and we're probably going to learn from it. So good. As long as we learn from it, it's really not a failure. We just did it the wrong way. This has been something for me that has, when I look back, as always was ingrained very early. And I think my athletic background, I remember from a very early age, is that I always, you look back and you're like, well, I always played on, pretty good teams. And there was one instance when we were juniors in high school. We were a very new team. We had a lot of young people playing. We had a lot of juniors playing in my class, and we weren't very experienced. A lot of the class that had just graduated was extremely, extremely good, and they started a lot of guys. And so a lot of us, were playing varsity football for the very first time. And even knowing that, I'll never forget this as long as I get kind of the goosebumps thinking about it. But, we're in camp, and it's probably about this time of the year. We're at our kind of team bonding thing, and one of the coaches says, you guys do know that you can win state. And it was one of those things where we're kind of like looking at each other like two of us that like played last year. Like, what are you talking about? But it was that understanding that you can do anything that you set your mind to. You just have to have the right mindset. And so I look back on that and understand that that has been an easy thing for me to do because it's always been ingrained in me. But it is sometimes difficult, especially as we get into the real world and life gets in the way, family, situations, different stuff like that, to believe that there is failure out there and that we can fail. And so that's one of the things that, while it's been easy for me, it's one of those things that I know that there are people that struggle with that. So it's really understanding and training and setting an example of, hey, we can learn from this. We'll be all right. It's not a big deal. Like, no one died. We're good. Like, we just chose the wrong way to do it. Like, I don't know how many times we've screwed stuff up. We do things drastically different than we did 3 years ago. Some stuff works better, some stuff not so much. So let's go back and figure out a better way to do it. And I think it is the understanding that, as a leader especially, is that people who fear failure, who fear going into a change and thinking, those people, a lot of them, they already think it's going to be a failure before it even starts. So there's no acceptance of change, and that can be the same case for the person in a leadership role, is not understanding that things have to be explained, or else there may be that sense of failure way before we even dive into something. So to me, there is a mesh point, especially when you come into looking at this from a leadership role and looking at failure, is as a leader, you've got to make sure your team doesn't have this mentality. They've got to understand that here's the deal. We're going to try something new. Here's why we're trying it. Here's kind of my reasoning behind it. One, what kind of feedback do you guys got? What do you got? Do you got any suggestions, different stuff like that? And there again, ultimately, we're going to have to choose a path. We're going to have to choose a path, and that may not be the path that everybody wanted to do, but in my mind, as long as everybody is of the understanding that we're going to learn from this, regardless of what in the heck we do, and yeah, we may have to switch to that other path. Well, that's not to say that the people who said to go to the other path can, look at the other and say, hey, you big idiot. No, we're all in this together. We're all learning. We're all collaborating to find the best way to do this. Unfortunately, there is no handbook in growing and getting better. If there is, please show it to me. I'd like to take a look at it. We're all learning and we're all growing. And so it takes both sides. So you as the leader have to make sure that your team is all on the same page. They understand why. Obviously, I think a lot of the failure piece and people having that outset, well, obviously, if they have that at the outset of things, it's never going to be successful. Even if it was a good idea, no one ever gave it a chance because we had that limiting belief at the outset. And why do we have limiting beliefs? Because it's comfortable. It's a lot easier to say, well, I don't want to change. I don't want to do that. That seems silly. And I think it is just so important to understand that we are going to fail. But it's not really failure. We're just learning. You learn from positive stuff too, but everybody's heard the saying, I learn a whole hell of a lot more when I screw something up than when I do it right. Because oftentimes when we do it right, we may have got lucky, something may have fallen in the right direction, but we think, oh, this is the right way to do it. Well, in the end, it may not turn out to be that way. And so, there's endless examples of people who in history have failed multiple times before they ever make it to where they're going. And, the one in particular I was going to pull out of here because I just thought it was an awesome story. It had me guessing. But see if you can guess who this person is. It is, let me find the page here. So he goes through this, and it's basically someone's life story. So it goes, this is a man who failed in business at age 21, was defeated in a legislative race at age 22, failed again in business at 24, overcame the death of his sweetheart at age 26, had a nervous breakdown at 27, lost a congressional race at age 34, lost a congressional race at age 36, lost a Senate race at 45, lost a Senate race failed in an effort to become the vice president at 47, lost a Senate race at 49, and then was elected president at 52. Abe Lincoln, which may be some categorized as maybe the best president of all time. He failed, or what could have been viewed as failure, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and those are just the ones they documented. So think about all the other things that he probably learned from rather than view it as a failure. The third one, and this is my favorite one when it comes to leadership and when it comes to personal leadership as well. And that is the lie of always taking responsibility for your actions. So personally, taking responsibility for your actions ultimately puts you in control. That's what, we all want, is to be in control of our destiny, be in control of where we want to go in life and what we want to do. The cool thing is being a leader, and I've said this many a times, and I say this all the time because I think it's true and it's helped me a ton, is as a leader, you must take responsibility for the actions of your team. I absolutely dread, well, this person, they just don't get it. They just can't get it. They don't understand. Yep, never going to get it. Yep. Really? Whose fault is that? Uh-oh. Maybe yours. Not maybe yours. It is yours. It's your fault. That's what you signed up to be. Unfortunately, our society views leadership as oftentimes kind of this dictator, kind of this taskmaster, kind of this person who just barks out orders. I haven't really seen one of those succeed. Where I have seen people succeed is people who take responsibility for the actions of their team. The cool thing about this is that it starts with yourself. Obviously, you've got to lead yourself. I often talk about leadership of yourself. But it is when you take responsibility for the actions of your team is when you can truly start leading. And the crazy thing about that is if you take responsibility and you say, okay, I'm good with that, well then you also got to believe that there's no failure and that everything happens for a reason. Then it starts to get really hairy, because at that point in time, you've got to understand that anytime someone makes a mistake, that's your fault, but it happens for a reason and there's no failure, so we can learn from this. See, putting it all together is where it gets tough, because if you believe one but you don't believe the others, it doesn't really work out so well. Because if you take responsibility for the actions of your team, but you don't believe everything happens for a reason, and you think that you can fail, you're not going to be a very good leader, because you're not going to have very many people working for you. Because everyone's going to mess up. Everyone's going to do something wrong. It's not so much about reprimanding or anything like that. In the business world, we're all adults. As I always say, everybody came here to do a good job. More than likely, they just don't know what in the heck they're doing. Or they need some training. Or they just need some time. Or they need something explained to them. And that's where, when you understand that taking responsibility ultimately gives you the most power, even though you may feel out of control sometimes, because it's like, well, if I take responsibility for everybody's actions, I can't make her do this, or I can't make him do this, and how am I ever going to do this? Well, you do it by understanding that everything happens for a reason and that there is no failure. That's how you ultimately take the responsibility of others. You can't, I do not advise, please, I do not advise taking responsibility for everybody's actions and not believing the first two. You are going to be in a world of hurt because you're going to drive yourself insane. We all have to be willing to bend, whether you are the leader or you're following somebody. We all have to bend. There again, is it easy to get off track in any of these three? Absolutely. I do on a daily basis. The worst part is when you teach people this, they call you on it. Like my brother called me on it yesterday. I was worrying about some situation. Well, you always tell me that you... Okay, I get it. God dang it. I guess it's getting through to him. So that's a positive. But I didn't want to hear that. I was driving down the street. I wanted to vent. But there again, it's okay to vent. It's okay to get upset. That's natural. That's human. But so long as we come back to these things. You know what? Hey, let's work through this. It's not a big deal. Maybe someone got off course. But the good thing is we're all in this together and we all can help each other. We all can help each other get better. Hey, I didn't understand that. Why are we doing this? What's going on here? Why did we make this change? Okay, well, let's just talk it out. Oftentimes, we may attempt to do these things, and what breaks it down is communication. And we work on that all the time. God, we've gotten better, but man, we still got a long way to go. I mean, we were really bad there for a while, and we got better. We just keep getting better each and every day. We're going to fall off track, yep. But, there again, we didn't fail. We're just learning. Just all part of it. We're just on this journey, trying to figure it out. That's life. I mean, think about your kids. How many times have they screwed up? They're not bad kids. They screwed up. All right, kick them back on the road. What can we learn from this? What's going on? We have to be willing to accept these things in order to lead. And ultimately, if you're following, you can help your leader get better. We all can help each other. It doesn't matter what spot you're at. As I always say, you can lead from anywhere. You can lead by example. You've got to look internal. And when you take responsibility for who you are, regardless of your position, and you understand that everything happens for a reason, there's no failure, and ultimately I'm going to take responsibility for my actions, then we're going to all be in a better place. We're all going to create a better company. Because at that point in time, we can't help but help each other.